Imagine you're driving home from college back to your hometown to visit your parents for a long weekend. The roads are normal, no icy weather conditions or anything. All of a sudden, you are knocked unconscious out of nowhere, hit head on with a really bad head injury that for the next 10 years, you still wouldn't remember exactly what happened leading up to this event, including the collision itself. It turns out your car was absolutely crumpled and was leaking fuel, but you feel like there was someone watching over you that day. Not only was the vehicle behind you an ambulance, but just a few days before this, during the last visit with your family, your mom gave you a necklace with St. Christopher on it, and you were wearing it during that crash. What you had come to realize is St. Christopher is the patron saint of travel. This is Bright Lights Beyond.
Synchronicities.
Ooh, spooky. Chills. Who has goosebumps?
Raise your hand right now if you have goosebumps.
We can see you.
We can see you because we can feel you.
Your energy.
Welcome back to episode number 3, guys. We are getting into it. We're getting into the synchronicities of life.
I love it. I am so excited. Lucky number 3.
In this episode, we're going to be talking about signs. Yes, you heard me. Signs. Like the 2002 M. Night Shyamalan movie of the same name.
The movie that we simultaneously all grew up loving and hating for how much it scarred us as children. If you know, you know. The alien scene.
Truly. That alien scene is the thing of nightmares, but also dreams. We all love a good alien. You know what I mean? But before we get into M. Night Shyamalan's 2002 critically acclaimed movie Signs, I wanted to give a special thank you to everybody who listened to last week's episode, especially those who did brave the internet and reach out to us via our website. Remember, guys, the best way to help us and support us is by liking, sharing, interacting, and just watching, listening to it multiple times. I mean, we all know that, we all sleep real close to our phone, so if we want to, leave it on in the night.
We're not saying no.
Again, I just wanted to thank you guys for listening, and we're super excited to get back into this episode, which is about
signs. What are signs and why should we believe in them? So the Greek word semeion, which feel free to clock me if I pronounce that incorrectly, which translates to a sign, typically in a miraculous nature that is given especially to confirm, corroborate, or authenticate. And I thought that was a really great example of the types of signs we're going to be talking about today. In many spiritual traditions, signs are seen as messages from the divine, the universe, or our spirit guides and guardian angels. They're nudges in the right direction or warnings to pause and reflect. They can be numbers, songs, names, objects, essentially anything and everything, but they must have meaning to you. So kind of like how we talked about the difference between a synchronicity and a coincidence, the synchronicity aspect is that it has meaning to you. The same thing kind of goes for a sign. It can be, like I said, essentially anything. It's just what you attribute it to, that meaning element. And people believe in signs because they offer comfort, guidance, and sometimes a sense of connection to something greater than ourselves. It's a reminder that we're either on the right path or we need to go in another direction and kind of point us towards that right direction. And the very concept of signs goes back throughout time and space, essentially. Omens and prophecies are things we've heard, in books, in movies, and they're really rooted in history itself. It all goes down to people trying to find their place in the universe by looking for signs. Omens throughout time varied from lightning, cloud movements, the flight patterns of birds, the migration paths of certain sacred animals to different cultures. It is essentially anything and everything. But again, it's that meaning that's attributed to it. And the ancient Greeks consulted oracles. That was a really integral element of their culture. The Norse believed in runes as messages from their gods. And when we look at these different practices throughout time, it just shows us again that human longing for guidance is as old as time itself. It's really fascinating to see how these different cultures interpreted these signs, what they viewed as signs, and what it meant for their decisions and their understandings of the world.
Bringing it back kind of to what we just talked about in the movie Signs, there's a scene where it's Graham and Meryl, and they're sitting on the couch, and this is right after they start to realize, oh shoot, the aliens are actually coming, and Meryl's looking for some kind of comfort. And Graham says, well, take this analogy, pretty much. He says there are two types of people in the world: the people that believe when something lucky happens to them, it's just a stroke of luck and it's chance, that's all it is. Or the people, when something lucky happens to them, they believe it's happening for a reason. And in this scene, Meryl comes to the conclusion that he's a miracle man. He believes that there's no such thing as a coincidence and everything happens for a reason. And I think that this kind of overarching theme in this movie, Signs, is kind of like how people do interpret signs in today's world. For example, there are people who will look at something and just see the surface of it, and that's okay. Then there's also people who will look at something, a similar thing, and really go into the intricacies and the depth of what that sign or situation is trying to tell them.
So, Lexi, you talked about the two different people, the people who view luck as a miracle and the people who view luck as pure chance. Do you have any tips or advice for things we should look out for to catch those signs?
So, in my research on this and like how we are better able to perceive signs, I came across Jack Canfield, who's an author, a psychologist, an educator, a life coach. He's actually the guy behind the Chicken Soup for the Soul publishing company. That's him. And I came across a video he had about receiving signs from the universe. And a lot of times when people talk about receiving signs or seeing signs, they're talking about the law of attraction, like we spoke about in the first episode. What you want, you have near to you. You think positively, positive things happen, bringing these things into your life that you want to see. So he gives 5 ways for us to kind of see the signs in our life and make sense of them. The first way is the experience of joy. He basically says that when we're living our happiest life or living to fulfill the most amount of joy, that means that everything and all the signs that we've seen have pointed us in the right direction. That means that we're living via the laws of the universe or the laws of attraction, and we're living in our joy. And he says basically that's kind of the number one like touchstone. It's like living by joy means you're following the sign. The second thing he says is any physical pain you might be experiencing could be the physical manifestation of something, and it means that you need to address the issue. For example, if you have like a pain in your side, maybe there is something physical happening and maybe you should get that checked, or maybe there's something that's bothering you. You need to look deeper into why this is physically manifesting that way. The third thing is anything that gets stuck in your head, like a song, a phrase, a dream. For example, if you have a dream about your great grandmother and she's passed on and you're like, I should really go visit her, and you keep having this dream over and over again, maybe it's time for you to go back to the cemetery. Or if it's a song, for example, like Margaritaville, maybe it's time for you to take a vacation and get yourself a margarita. Number 4, it's your own inner voice and your intuition. That means that the answer is already inside of you. Just like they say, mother's intuition. If you feel something is right or you feel something is wrong, that's your inner being, and that's a sign to follow or not to follow what it's telling you. A great way to get this is through meditation. And I know my mom does a lot of transcendental meditation, and I'm telling you, TM really does work. The 5th one, which I think is so cool and something that you don't always think about, but yeah, it's right in front of you. Simply ask the universe what it's trying to tell you. We've all been places and we've been like, is this a sign? Like, what are you trying to say? Like, just tell me. Why don't you simply ask God or the universe or light, what are you trying to tell me? And then maybe it'll answer you. Maybe it'll be a clear sign, or maybe through prayer or meditation or the higher power will answer. I don't know, but that is a great way to get a sign. So those are the things that Jack says to do. And I feel like I could definitely implement those in my own life for sure.
Yes, definitely. So we've talked a lot about signs, what they are, what they can mean, but my question to you, Lexi, is could there be a certain someone or a certain figure actually behind these signs that's sending them to us?
You know, Andie, that is such a good question because along with omens and prophecies and things we've also heard in movies and whatnot, books, there are things called spirit guides and guardian angels. And a lot of times these beings, these entities, are depicted when, I guess, signs or fate are involved. So I would love to talk a little bit about what a spirit guide is, what a guardian angel is. So throughout history, guardian angels and spirit guides have been depicted in numerous occasions. A lot of times we see them when we're talking about indigenous cultures. Grandmother Willow. It's like an ancestor that is there to help you connect from the spiritual world to the reality and help you navigate your life paths. It also comes up in spiritualism, which was really big in the late 19th century. And that's the introduction of, I guess, like using mediums to talk to our spirit guides. Then you have religious traditions that bring in more of a guardian angel, this protector who helps you navigate your life, but is there to protect you from harm or in times of crisis. And then you have depictions in the New Age and more metaphysical beliefs. And that is along the lines of like a universal protection and guidance. The best way to describe it is, so a spirit guides are there to offer guidance and support and help you navigate life's challenges and help you grow spiritually. While guardian angels are there to offer protection to individuals throughout their lives and to intervene in dangerous or in times of crisis. So think of it as like spirit guides are there to help you connect and guide you in a spiritual way, and in turn help you live your life to the highest joy and the best you can. And guardian angels focus is more there to protect you on this path. So through these, I guess, spirit guides and guardian angels, I feel like they're interpreted and depicted in a lot of different cultures.
We see spirit guides and guardian angels kind of across the board when it comes to cultures. It's actually a really beautiful kind of tapestry of beliefs that's all woven together to create, our modern day view of what spirit guides and guardian angels are. In Christianity, guardian angels are kind of seen as protectors, like what you said, Lexie. They're kind of just assigned to us. And sometimes these are loved ones who have passed and are on the other side and are watching out for us and only really intervene in those moments of crisis. Or they could even be, saints or other really big figures in the church that have since passed that we just feel a special connection to and feel like are there to kind of guide us in those moments when we need them most. Meanwhile, many indigenous cultures believe in spirit guides that could be ancestors or even animal spirits that offer wisdom and protection. And they're not just there for us when it comes to those moments of, crisis or danger. They're really there with them throughout their everyday lives. In Hinduism, there's a belief in protective deities or ancestors who guide and protect their descendants. So we're seeing a lot of those familial ties, throwing it back to episode 2, kind of the family ties that translate into the afterlife. And that tie isn't severed just because you two may be in 2 different realms. I feel like when we talk about spirit guides, a lot of people think of the movie Coco, which 10 out of 10, there's the Alebrijes. And Coco, it's his little dog, his little Zolo, who kind of guides him in that spiritual realm.
It's interesting for sure. And I think that what makes guardian angels and spirit guides so cool to learn about, and because it's kind of like they are depicted in so many different ways. And also what's cool is that they're signs that accompany these different entities, like a spirit guide or a guardian angel. There's different signs that accompany them. So for example, when you're talking about Coco and his dog and someone who is kind of a bridge between life and the spirit realm, it really makes sense, and especially ties into synchronicities and kind of like the universal being of everything.
Despite the different ways that spirit guides and guardian angels show up and are represented in cultures throughout time, even in families, there's a really common thread of just the belief in a benevolent presence that guides us through life. It's a reminder of our shared human experience and that search for meaning and connection in the unseen.
And that kind of brings me to, I guess there are a couple different things that spirit guides slash guardian angels can do that might be the sign in your life. For example, synchronicity. Like spirit guides and guardian angels communicate through repeating numbers. They communicate through symbols and events and thoughts and intentions. Then you have your own intuition and your own insight. The gut feeling, the quiet reflection you have when you think back on the things you've done. Nature symbols. For example, a lot of different guardian angels and spirit guides use nature as a bridge because that is almost like the ultimate bridge between the higher being, God, and then us, because we don't have a concept of nature because it's already made. We didn't make nature. So that's kind of like a way that they use. You can see it in certain animals, plants, natural phenomena. Then you have dreams and visions. So like symbolic imagery or straight up direct intentions through a dream you see. And lastly, feeling presence. So a lot of people who say that they have a guardian angel maybe will look behind them and they'll feel the presence of someone watching them or taking care of them. And I think that these add in so beautifully with synchronicities and like how everything has meanings and signs. And if you look hard enough, you'll find something.
And on that note, we have a guest with us here today.
My friend Peyton is here, and I met Peyton about, I want to say 6 years ago when I was working in Austin. And he's someone that I find has a pretty unique experience with different things like signs and life, religion, and just kind of like the way he moves about the world, I guess. And so we're excited to talk to him today about kind of his experiences with signs and synchronicities, and super excited to get to learn more about Peyton.
Yo, it's your boy Peyton. Yeah, like Lexi said, I mean, we met like 6 years ago when we were out there in Austin. I feel like I do have a pretty unique experience, I'm a pretty religious person, and so I believe synchronicities to be, in a sense, like how God would talk to it, but it's more of like a worldly name for it.
Yeah, I can definitely see that there's a lot of similarities between, like, I guess the vehicle in which we use to talk about meaningful coincidences in our lives. So, I guess, how did you first become aware of synchronicities or signs in your life?
So for me, I would say, I mean, it started when I was little. I feel like I've always kind of known about synchronicities. I just never really knew the name for it. I mean, for example, obviously there's like 10, 10, 11, 11. Oftentimes in my own life, it would be like I'd have a profound thought and I would look at the clock and the time would be like 10, 10, for example. I'd be like, well, that's kind of weird. And so if anything, it would like affirm my thought. And so I would say that's how I like first got introduced to it all.
I think that's really cool, especially with like synchronicities. And in a lot of times, the repeating numbers are called angel numbers. Why I wanted to have you on is because you are someone who like looks for these signs in their lives and makes like meaning of them. There are some people who may have these experiences and like have a crazy thought and it is like 1111, or see something and just blow it off like, oh, that's weird. But you're someone who kind of looks deeper into it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, to me, life has meaning. So everything that goes on, there's always like another meaning to it, whether we realize it or not.
I love that we got to learn a little bit about like your history with synchronicities. I think it's important to talk about like when you first became aware of them because that kind of set you on the path you're on now, I presume. And so now that we've kind of talked about like where you first got started when it comes to synchronicities, can you tell us about like the most impactful sign or synchronicity you've encountered and kind of how did it affect your life past that point?
So to me, my biggest synchronicity are cardinals. And so there's a saying that cardinals represent people who have passed away coming back to visit you to say hello or like let you know like, hey, I made it to the other side. And so my dad, whenever my great grandma passed away, his grandma, he went camping out in the woods and he was just in a cabin. And he said that a cardinal would wake him up every day at like 6 o'clock in the morning. It would just peck on the window. Like, and this had been after she had passed away. So he thought that was weird. And he had heard that saying before, and he's actually the one who I got that from. And what is weird is like fast forward a few years, I will say my dad has passed away, and during this time I came across a lot of cardinals. It was actually very weird. There was a time like literally the day after my dad passed away and I was going for a run just to like blow off steam, and on my way back to my car it was weird. All of a sudden like the brightest red cardinal I've ever seen like flew right past me, and it was almost like my dad was like, hey Peyton, it's okay. You know, I've definitely had other situations where like people have passed away and cardinals have been in my life.
There's something to be said about like different symbols and signs in nature. And animals sometimes can be like the vehicle between the different realms, kind of signaling to you. So that's definitely something that does happen for sure.
There was one time, like after my dad had passed away, it had been like a few months, and I was still grieving, and I was calling out loud to God, like the other side, you know, like I listed 4 names of people that I knew had passed away, and I saw 4 cardinals at separate points, and I thought that was very weird. And 2 of them interacted with each other. What's weird is like 2 of the people that I know, like they interacted with each other in real life. So it's like that kind of thing is almost like surely there's something to that.
Oh, no doubt. And I think the thing about like different signs is that sometimes, like in the way that we look at signs, there are several different ways we can go about, I guess, trying not to conjure, but to like see them. And one of them is just like simply ask, like, can you send me a sign? And when the universe or God responds with the sign, like we have to take them for what they're meaning when we see what we ask for, you know?
I know, I love that story. And I mean, I feel like just from what you said is like it's a very clear picture into what synchronicities and those signs like mean for you, like as kind of a reassurance of like there is another side, your loved ones are like watching over you. And so would you say like moving forward that those moments of synchronicity like have maybe not changed the way you live but changed your perception of life or how, you know, you go about your day to day?
I would say so. I mean, I feel like I started to take life a lot more seriously, and I always try to look more in depth on things because not everything is surface level. A lot of times there's a lot going on underneath. So I always try to just scope that out, if that makes sense. Other synchronicities that I've had. So willow trees, like weeping willow trees, are considered spiritual trees. And so there was a weeping willow tree in my like apartment complex in the dog park. And there was one night where I was like a Wednesday night and I had just volunteered at church. And I got off and I was walking my sister's dog because we lived together at this time. And it was probably like 9 o'clock at night. It's a full moon and I'm underneath the willow tree. And all of a sudden, this guy comes up to me and he has a solid white dog like the most beautiful dog I've ever seen. And then we just get to talking. And then he started to like ask me about things. And I don't know, it was just like very deep questions that not a stranger should be asking anybody, you know? There are things like that. And he prayed over me at the end, but it was very impactful. And to me, I understand what it means. And not everybody will, but that's okay.
Well, okay, just even in our own personal experience, that one time we were getting coffee, I had never had this happen to me before, but we were getting coffee and we were just catching up. There was someone who came up to us, and like I said, this has never happened to me ever. And he went to Peyton and he was like, I'm sorry, but can I just pray with you guys? Like, it was just, it was something that I was like, I know that things like that happen to you. And I think that there are certain synchronicities or signs appear to, but that happened when I was with you. And I was like, although I'm not sure what it means to me, I know that it was, I don't know, it was something that was impactful enough for me to be like, that is
kind of weird. Maybe he does have a point, you know?
Maybe he does something. He's doing something.
Right. Like maybe he's really not that crazy.
Kind of, actually. Do you believe that signs and synchronicities like all have universal meanings? Is there like a universal meaning to all of them, or is it purely like personal?
Yeah, it does. I would say it's both. I mean, for instance, the cardinal thing, that's very much universal. It's more like the individual has to put themselves onto it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that does. And you've said it several times now that you consider yourself a very like spiritual person in terms of like a religious person. And how do you perceive, I guess, the role of like a guardian angel? Have you thought of these different synchronicities that have happened to you as those things?
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say that I have at least one, if not multiple. Like the amount of times I've come close to death and have walked away virtually unscathed is crazy. When I was 17, this is like when I really noticed it. Like this is when I was like, yo, there's somebody watching over me. When I was 17, I was taking somebody home from a Christmas party, and it was probably like 2 o'clock in the morning. I hadn't been drinking or anything. I was completely sober. I was just driving the girl home. And so we're in the left-hand lane, and there's an exit off to the right side, and I'm on the far left, and my car at the time is a Nissan Murano, and they're top heavy. So I was like, I keep going straight, right? And she's like, yeah, go straight. And then like literally as we come up on the exit, she's like, oh no, that's the exit. And I was like, okay. So I whipped it to make the exit. But since the car is top heavy, I started to spin and we lost control, hit the curb, and it rolled down a hill 3 times and we landed upside down and I had to kick my door open. It was crazy. And I literally walked out of it with a seatbelt rash. And so to me, after that point, I was like I literally should have died that night. There was no reason for me to really be alive, but I am. That's like when it first shifted for me. And that's when I recognized like I have a guardian angel watching over me.
You talked about like the impact of guardian angels, and I want to know how this relates like to the synchronicities you've told us about. I mean, I think in terms of like the cardinals, it's maybe a little bit more obvious, but I mean, do you view these signs and synchronicities as your guardian angel slash angels communicating with you, or maybe reinforcing, you know, that you're on the right path or that you need to take a different path, whatever it may be? And is there like one specific example, maybe other than those cardinals, that really sticks out to you as like a communication from that guardian angel or spirit guide?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, to me, I attribute it to God and to Jesus, but I recognize that there are times when it probably is a guardian angel and things like that where they step in. For instance, that car crash. I mean, I was in a car crash last week as well, and literally by the grace of God, I walked out of that unscathed because I should have hit another car. I was in 5 o'clock traffic, and a lady like jumped the median and sideswiped me, and literally a gap opened up as soon as I got hit, and so it hit me hard enough to hit me into the next lane in that open gap. And so I was like, that's kind of weird. Where like very fortunately, it could have been much worse. So I just got back over, got out, and I made sure everybody was okay. But to me, like it's things like that. I'm like, yeah, that's a guardian angel.
Definitely. I think you've given some really great examples of all these times where, you know, it should have been a lot worse outcome. And like, it just so happened that, like you said, like a spot opened up in the lane next to you where your car fit perfectly.
For sure. And there was a time I went for a run on the Trinity and I took a path that I never take. And whenever I took the path, I was like, let me just see what happens. And I came across this bridge and I was just like scoping out the view, looking at the river. And all of a sudden, this older lady comes up and she has like turtle food to feed the turtles. And I was just like, hey, can I feed the turtles? And she's like, yeah, by all means. And we just got to talking. And then I barely mentioned God. And then all of a sudden, we started talking about our spiritual faith. And she prayed over me at the end. And I thought that was very weird. In a sense, like that's a synchronicity just because I don't ever take that path. And the time that I did, something actually happened.
Yeah, like I would definitely consider that a synchronicity. Like you were meant to go down that path where you just so happen to run into someone who like is very much aligned in your beliefs and you shared that moment together.
What I think is so interesting about spirituality and religion, and especially as it relates to signs, synchronicities, guardian angels, spirit guides, is that there's a level of, I guess, faith and asking and wanting to receive or be open to the message. A lot of times with, I guess, spirit guides or guardian angels especially, they're related to like protection. And like you were saying about, multiple times getting into car accidents or just having people around you who will go out of their way and pray with you, which is not something that is common, honestly. It might be common when you're at church, but certainly not when you're just walking about or at a cafe or whatever. There's a certain level that you have to be open and willing to hear and receive those messages, especially in spirituality and in faith and religions when it comes to things like guardian angels.
Well, and I think you have to be careful too, because not everything that happens is from God. So you also have to distinguish, like, is this from God or my guardian angel? And just because it happens on a synchronicity doesn't necessarily mean it's like from higher up. It could be from lower down.
With religion, that certainly is the case, but especially in the universe, just to bring it universal, it's a balancing act of good and evil. Like there is light and dark everywhere. And you have to trust your intuition and, I guess, follow spirit guides or your guardian angel, or follow what your intuition tells you about these different circumstances, because the universe is good and bad and light and dark. And there is certainly signs that, wrong way, turn around, girl.
I was just going to say there's definitely also like signs that you're on the right path, which may be from like, the positive universal or the positive religion, whatever it may be. Or it's like still a message from something positive, but it's like, hey, you're going down the wrong path. You're going into, a space maybe you shouldn't be in, or a career that's not right for you, or whatever it may be. So I think it's, also determining where the message comes from is one element, and what it can mean in your life.
I agree. Even, I mean, for that specific example, I was just working at Honda. I was working there with my brother, but whenever I got there, I immediately recognized it as like a darker place just because of how everybody was treating everybody. And whenever I was there, I was only there for 2 weeks, but during these 2 weeks, I felt like every day there was a sign telling me like you deserve better. And it's almost like, why are you here? And so it had me start questioning myself, like, I don't know, why am I here? Do I deserve better? And I do deserve better. So that's why I ended up leaving there, only working there for 2 weeks, just to like go off of what you were saying.
Totally. And I think when we get into it, a lot of different signs, the ultimate sign that you can look for, like the touchstone, the North Star, I guess, is what brings you joy. And from your joy, then comes all the signs you need to lead you in the right direction. Like your joy, not all, I guess, a lot though, but like your personal joy and like what makes you happy, what makes you a good fellow at church, what makes you a good father, a son, insert term. Your joy, being happy and being joyful, I feel like from your joy, you can take the signs that are presented to bring you the most joy, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so I feel like there's a lot of people out there who, doubt like the significance of those signs and those synchronicities. So, what would you say to people who are doubting?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, you can be a skeptic, but I can guarantee you that in every single life, there has been something that we cannot explain that has happened and we have walked away from. Or there are things that have happened that maybe it's an opportunity, but we don't really like that opportunity like came out of nowhere kind of thing. So even those I would consider synchronicities because you have no control over those. Those came out of nowhere. Those in a sense were your miracles. And so it's just the perspective is different.
So, if you could give our listeners one piece of advice about recognizing and interpreting synchronicities, what would it be?
Not everything means something every single time, but there are times when you just know. And I'd say whenever you know, I mean, it was like, as you were saying earlier, Lexi, like you have to trust your intuition and just be like, I trust this feeling. I'm going to go for it and see where it takes me.
Is there anything you'd like to share or leave our listeners with about your personal experience, or is there anything else you want the BLB commune to know?
I'd say, we all go through hard times, but you just got to keep pushing forward and know that God is actually there. He's working with us. And I'd say, as long as you keep an optimistic mindset, things change and things can always get better. And know that just because somebody has a different view than you doesn't mean they're the enemy. You should just listen and see what they have to say.
I love that.
Wise words, definitely.
Wise words. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us.
Of course. Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
So after listening to Peyton's unique experiences with synchronicities, I do think that just the thought of them and just knowing kind of what to look for in signs and hearing his spirituality and how that's also driven him, maybe we can all find that in our own lives and have whatever drives us, I guess, kind of help us and guide us to our most joy and the signs that we see all around us. So maybe it's a good time for everyone to like jot down some synchronicities or some angel numbers that we all see, or just a squirrel that always comes by, or, you know, start to clock these different signs in our own lives, whether we think that they're super important right now or not, you know?
Yes, 100%. And I know Carl Jung would be proud of this episode.
He's our spirit guide. I didn't want to say it, but like maybe he's our spirit guide. You guys, thank you so much for tuning in. Remember, follow us, Bright Lights Beyond, on Instagram. Interact with us on Spotify, all the good things. And remember, guys,
Live life beyond.